What is impact investing? Oh my goodness, this is like one of my favorite topics. I love talking about impact investing. I love being able to introduce this concept to people who've never heard about it before. And for those who have heard about it, but kind of like don't really know the ins and outs, I'm going to give you a really nice full overview of what the heck impact investing really means. So this is like the textbook definition. This is like, if we want to look at it, the impact investments are investments made with the intention to generate positive, measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. Okay. So these are investments. These are investments. We're going to earn a financial rate of return on these investments. Money is involved with this. We're earning that return. But in addition to that return, we also have a positive and measurable impact. And this measurable piece is really, really important, because the idea here is that this is going to be more about direct investing, right? Which is it's not going to be so much the secondary impact. This is really trying to be that direct positive impact, is really kind of what we're aiming for here. The language that I use when it comes to impact investing is that, instead of risk versus return, right? Whenever we evaluate a regular investment, I look at the risks, I look at the returns, I say, hey, are the returns worth the risk? Right? Is it a good investment? But when it comes to impact investing, we still have the risks, which we're going to talk about today. I'm going to show you how to evaluate the risks when it comes to an impact investment. But instead of just the financial return, when it comes to impact investments, we've got the return plus the warm fuzzies. Okay. And now this could be like positive impact, right? And absolutely, it's nice to have that nice, positive, measurable impact. But to me, so much of the return when it comes to impact investing is the warm fuzzies, is that I just feel really good about this. And that to me, it's like, I do want the impact to be positive and measurable, but at the same time, really want to recognize that these warm fuzzies are kind of intangible. It's going to be different for everyone. Hopefully you can find an impact investment that does give you those warm fuzzies, that does align with the type of world that you want to retire into. Now, looking at this system, at the broader system, if you've seen some of my presentations before, you've probably seen this slide before, right? For those of you who haven't, who are new to, the way I approach investing, that really sustainable investing, this is kind of the umbrella term. This is the big banner. Sustainable investing can mean a whole bunch of different things. I tend to break it up into a couple different categories: doing less evil and doing more good. This is the language that I use. The doing less evil side, we're not so much going to talk about this tonight, but my goodness, I could do an entire webinar on ESG, which is environmental social governance. These are these sort of sustainability scores that corporations get. We can talk about divestment, where we want to completely eliminate our investments in things like tobacco or weapons or fossil fuels. And shareholder engagement is about owning shares of those companies and then pushing those companies in the right direction. Right. And again, I could do a whole webinar on each one of these. There is so much content for me. Oh my goodness. But really what we're going to focus on tonight is the doing more good side of the equation, right? These doing less evil are really about earning what we call market rates of return. So earning whatever the standard market rate, and just kind of doing less evil. Whereas with impact investing, it really falls under this doing more good manner, alongside what I call thematic investing. This is where we invest in like green themes, like renewable energy and clean tech, things like that. So tonight we're going to talk about impact investing. And again, this is really about having that we're making direct investments into organizations, companies, nonprofits, right? And really looking to have that positive impact. I want to be clear that when it comes to a portfolio standpoint, I don't want you putting all of your money into impact investments at all, right? We're just going to start with a little bit, that most of your money should be in the doing less evil stuff. We can carve out part of your portfolio for the thematic stuff, the doing more good stocks. And then really it should just be a small sliver, 10% max. And this is usually across several different impact investments. With investing, we never want to put all of our eggs in one basket. And I want to be clear that when it comes to impact investing, this should only be done with a small slice of your overall portfolio. Right. And that even when it comes to impact investing, like there are a whole bunch of different things that we can do when it comes to impact investing. The biggest way we can split it up is between equity. So this is investing in companies where it's things like angel investing. So in startups, and we're sort of like an angel investor, giving them their first little bit of money to get them off the ground. Venture capital or VC, which is early stage startups. And then private equity, which is slightly more established, but still private companies. Again, these are all direct equity investments. These are going to be a little bit on the riskier side. What we're talking about tonight is fixed income. Okay. So this is what's known as debt, or we can talk about bonds as a form of like fixed income. But really, this is the side of equation that we're looking at. You might have heard me talk about community bonds. I've done a couple of webinars, and I'm a big fan of community bonds. Project finance is about investing in projects. So these are going to be loans to specific projects to help them get built. And private loans, which is really what GoParity is all about. This is going to be a private loan to a company that is doing some really, really cool things. This is going to be the social enterprises. So this is kind of like the system. This is what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is what I'm going to go through when it comes to, figuring this out, deciding, whether this is a good idea for you and how to get started. Really the equity side is riskier. It can also be a little more complicated. There's probably a bit more learning that needs to be done there. But the fixed income side is a really good place to get started. And that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. Really just want to give you like kind of the big picture system of how loans or a bond works, right? That basically, a bond is a loan. So we are loaning money to governments and corporations or nonprofits. That really the way any of this stuff works is we start by loaning money to the organization. They're going to use that money for whatever they need to do, whatever operations they've got. They're going to use that to be able to make some money. From there, from their profits, they're going to pay us interest on our loan. So again, right, we're not borrowing money, we're loaning money to these organizations. So we're going to earn interest. And it's sometimes every single month, sometimes it's once or twice a year, but we're going to be getting those interest payments. And then at the end of the term, so with loans and bonds, they usually are for what we call a fixed term, so a certain set of time. And we're going to talk about that because that's a really important part of a loan, is that at the end of the term, the whole principal is paid back. From there, we can decide, hey, do we want to reloan our money? We got to find a new place to be able to invest our money at the end of that term. So this is like the most basic structure of a loan or of a bond, right? And that really, when it comes to evaluating the specific risks of a loan or of a bond, there are three big risks that you need to consider. Risk number one is the liquidity risk, okay? That when we loan money, usually it is for a set period of time. So it could be for 3 years, or it could be for 5 years, or it could be for 10 years, right? And that for the most part, most of these loans, you can't get your money back before that time is up. That we are essentially locking in our money. And so this is what we call liquidity risk. Because if you need that money, if you decide, hey, I want to buy a house, or I want to buy a cottage, or I want to quit my job and go traveling all over the world for 2 years, and I need money to do that, right? Then you're not going to be able to access this money when it comes to these impact investments, when it comes to these loans, that typically we are locked in for a set period of time. And so you need to be okay with that liquidity risk, that your money is going to be locked in for that set piece of time. The second risk we have is what we call duration risk. This is sort of me wearing my economist hat. Duration risk, we often talk about this as interest rate risk. That when it comes to a loan or when it comes to a bond, really what we're doing is we're loaning money for a set period of time. Usually it's at a fixed interest rate. So how when you borrow money for a mortgage, right? When you get a mortgage, you can either get a fixed rate or a variable rate. A fixed rate, what that rate's going to be for the whole duration, right? Whereas the variable rate is going to go up and down with changes in interest rates. Well, when it comes to loans, that interest rate is going to be fixed, meaning that you're accepting that interest rate for the duration, for the time period of the loan. And if interest rates go up, well, guess what? You're stuck with that lower interest rate, that you could loan money to someone else and get a higher interest rate. But because you're locked in for that duration, you've got that fixed interest rate. So if you make a loan, right? And then interest rates go up, you do lose a little bit. You're a little bit worse off because now you're earning a lower interest rate than you could be able to get otherwise. That said, the opposite is true, that if you loan money at a fixed rate and interest rates go down, well, then, hey, now you're feeling great because you're locked in, you're getting that interest rate for a longer period of time, right? You're happy about that. That's the risk that you're taking here, that there is some interest rate risk, that when we have a fixed rate of return, right? If interest rates go up, well, it's a little sad because we could be earning more elsewhere, but we're kind of locked into this duration. Whereas if interest rates fall, we're like, yeah, we're happy because, hey, interest rates are lower, that, it's now we're locked in at a pretty sweet deal. So that's duration risk. That's what you want to consider. You want to make sure that you are comfortable earning that interest rate for the entire set period of time. The third risk is the big one. This is like the biggie when it comes to loans, when it comes to bonds, that the big risk that we're worried about is default risk. This is the risk that the organization goes bankrupt. Because if I loan money to someone and they go bankrupt, they're unable to pay the interest on my loan. Well, guess what? This is when, my money's at risk. So understanding this default risk, every investment is going to have a very unique default risk. It's important to ask the question, what happens in the worst case scenario? That some loans and some bonds are what we call asset backed, meaning that there's an asset backing that loan, such that if the organization goes bankrupt, not a big deal. They have an asset that they would sell, that if they're going to declare bankruptcy and they default on their loan, guess what? They have to sell their asset. And so we're going to get part of our money back based on what the value of that asset is, right? So if they, if they own an asset and they're able to sell it and get a really good price for it, that's fine. Even in a default, you might get your entire investment back. That said, if they default and it's a fire sale and they have to sell that asset at a really low price, you might only get, part of your investments back. When it comes to loans and when it comes to bonds, this is what we call taking a haircut, right? That you only get part of your money back. And fingers are crossed that we're just sort of getting a little trim, right? That it's just, maybe we get, 80% of our money back, 90% of our money back. Worst case scenario is that it's a buzz cut and there's only a little bit left and you're going to get a very, very small part of that initial investment back. That's like the worst case scenario. Now, other loans are not backed by an asset, right? This is why it's really important to understand what is the default risk, that if you're loaning someone and there is no asset behind that, then that does mean that in the event of a default where if they go bankrupt, you could lose your entire investment. So this is why it's really important to ask this question, before we invest in a loan or in a bond. We want to ask, what is the worst case scenario? What is that default risk, to make sure that we absolutely are comfortable with that risk? And this is where it's like a little checklist. If you're okay with the liquidity risk, you don't mind locking your money up for that period of time. You're okay with the duration risk. It's not going to bother you too much if interest rates, go up or down, right? And you're earning that fixed rate. And you're okay with the default risk, that you understand that, your money is at risk here, that you could lose part or all of it, right? As long as you can kind of tick off those three boxes and that you're comfortable with those three risks, awesome. You're good to go. You're ready to make an investment, at least from a risk perspective, that you understand the risks of investing in a loan or in a bond. So now we have this question. Am I ready to start impact investing? Okay, you understand what an impact investment is, that here we are talking about debt. So we are talking about these like impact bonds or impact loans. And so the question is, am I ready to start impact investing? Well, here's the journey. This is the journey. I've been able to distill it sort of into these 5 steps. I want you to understand the steps you need to take. That first, what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate the opportunity. You're going to understand the risks, right? Give it a feel for that risk versus the return plus the warm fuzzies. Is it worth it for you? If you decide, yep, I'm okay with the risks and I like the return plus the warm fuzzies, then you're going to decide how much to invest. This is where talking to a financial planner can be helpful. This is where I only want you to do a small slice of your overall portfolio, right? But I do want you to decide how much you're ready to invest. From there, once you've decided how much you're to invest, that's when you're going to create your account and actually invest the money. That's like the big like high five moment where it's like, woo, I made my first impact investment. From there, you're going to start collecting interest. And that interest is going to be deposited directly into your bank account. I can't tell you how happy it makes me whenever I look at my bank records and I see an interest payment from one of my impact bonds. I get so happy just to see that money coming in. And then at the end of the term, right, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever the term of the loan is, that's when you decide whether or not to reinvest. And the way you decide whether or not to reinvest is by evaluating the opportunity. So this is kind of like the big picture journey when it comes to these sort of impact bonds. This is what we're really, what I want you to think about. And that really, when it comes to evaluating the opportunity, you really want to make sure, ask yourself the question, am I okay with the risks? Liquidity risk, duration risk, default risk, am I okay with those? The answer is yes. Then am I okay with the return? Am I getting enough of a financial return plus warm fuzzies to warrant the risk that I'm taking? This is what we mean when we talk about evaluating the opportunity. That if you're like, yep, I'm okay with the risks, and yep, I'm okay with the return, that's when you can start to decide how much to invest. I really want you to start small with this, that when it comes to impact investing, the worst mistake you can make is to invest more than you should. Okay? That really when it starts with this, I'd rather you err on the side of caution and start small, knowing that you can always increase that investment over time. But it's really nice to be able to start small with these things. And I would suggest, especially for like your first impact investment, start it at max like 1% to 3% of your portfolio, right? So if you're in a position where, you've got like $10,000 of investments, you really should only be starting with like $100 or $300. If you're in a position where you've got $100,000 in your portfolio, awesome. You can invest about $1,000 to $3,000, like max. And then, if you've got $1 million portfolio and you're doing great, then amazing. That's when we can get into larger numbers. That's where you might consider investing, 10K to 30K max. But, again, it's because you've got $1 million that, you can afford to lose some. If you do end up having a default, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I never want anyone to put their retirement at risk, understanding that these things do have risks. From there, I always get this question, so I just want to kind of, address it right off the top, right off the bat, is that people always ask us, well, can I do this inside of an RSP or a TFSA? Or I've got kids and I want to do their RESP, their education savings plan. Can we do that? Sadly, that no, it's such a pain in the butt to hold these things inside of a registered account. Some of them you can legally, but the administrative burden is just like so high that they charge you fees and you have to fill out all these forms. And it's such a pain in the butt that like 99% of the time when I meet with clients, we just know we don't hold these inside of a tax shelter, right? So we do make the investment directly. It does mean that we're paying taxes on our interest, sadly. So it does mean we get a T5 slip, right? Every year for the interest payment. It does mean that your income or the interest payment does get added to your income. Kind of sucks, a little unfortunate. I wish it was easier to hold these things inside of tax shelters, but right now it's just not. So don't let that be a barrier for you to get started, but you can see why I do think it makes sense to start small. From there, when it comes to creating your account, so many people get stuck with this. They're like, yeah, I want to start impact investing. They go to create their account and they don't realize that they are going to need some rather personal information from you. So again, I just want to address this, give you a little heads up that if you're going to create your account, you are going to need photo ID. So it's usually like a driver's license or passport. They are going to need to verify your identity. You are going to need to have your SIN number. Again, you got to shoot a T5. So the CRA needs to know that you have this investment, right? So they are going to need your SIN number so that they can send you the tax forms and that everything is above board. And they're going to need your banking information. You're probably going to link it to your bank account. Obviously, you're going to need to make the initial investment, but then they're also going to need that banking info to pay you interest, that whenever you get those interest payments, it's usually like a direct deposit straight into your bank. So you are going to need to link it to your bank account. From there, forgive me, from there, it's great. You created your account, you make your investment, you just get to kick back and smile. That once you've made your investment, it really is all of this kind of upfront work, evaluating it. Am I okay with the risks and opportunities? deciding how much to invest, that's like the hard work. There's a little bit of paperwork involved. That's where so many people get stuck, is in the paperwork. Oh my goodness. Right? Throw on some music, pour yourself a glass of wine, just get the paperwork done. Because once it's done, it's done. Get to kick back, you get to relax, knowing that you are now earning a financial return and having a positive impact in the world. Oh my goodness, it feels so good once you make those investments. Before I get to Emily, I just want, for those who don't know me, the work that I do is that I am a financial planner. So I work with clients one-on-one. If you need help, if you want help figuring this out, how do I start impact investing? How much should I invest? I'm so overwhelmed by things. No problem. I got you covered. Everybody gets a free consultation. You can go to my website, goodinvesting.com. I have a free consultation button, right? Very easy. I'd love to meet you. We can chat for half an hour, figure out what help you need. If you need one-on-one help, I'm here for you. The other thing that I'm really excited about, this is probably the biggest way that I help people, is with my foundations course. So this is a cohort-based course. It's starting in 2 weeks. So I've got a new cohort. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But this is really, probably the biggest way that I do help people, especially if you're just getting started with this stuff. It's really about building